Hello and welcome to my Chapter 5 lecture on narrative theories of career counseling. All right, so we're going to look at postmodernism, Cochrane's narrative approach, Savicka's theory of career construction and counseling, and application to the cast of clients. So, introduction to postmodernism. So to understand it, it's useful to contrast it with modernism, and both are philosophical traditions. They do differ, however, with regard to their view of reality, truth, and their approaches to research and acquisition of knowledge, purpose of each theory, and the view of an individual's self. So modernism includes positive and post-positive approaches. It believes in an objective, actual reality, and believes reality has enduring properties which exist independent from those who observe it. And it also believes that scientific method is best used to gain an understanding of reality. As for implications for counseling, clients have a self that is knowable, and counselors are able to objectively observe clients and accurately come to know particular truths about them from the modernist perspective. As a positivist approach, it focuses on individual differences among people, categorizes them according to relatively stable traits, and counselors are able to help clients discover themselves as well as find careers that match this stable self that they're working to develop and create. The post-positivist approach, however, recognizes that people change over time, focuses on developing the self rather than a stable self, and counselors can help clients understand the career development process and find ways to actualize their developing self. So you see the differences between these different approaches. As for postmodernism, it challenges the modernist belief in an objective reality. It contends that meanings are created rather than discovered, and maintains that observers can never transcend their perceptual sets and therefore can never objectively observe anything. So you always have your feelings, basically. Implications for counseling: you acknowledge both objective and subjective selves, but focus on viewing each person's self as a project. You're interested in how each individual's identity is constructed in a relational context. So given the roles that a person fills, what is their identity in regards to these things? So for theories of career counseling, we're looking at the modern positivist, the modern post-positivist, and the post-modern, as we just reviewed. So you see the self as an object versus subject versus project across the three, right? And you see how they have different foci individually. Okay, so theories for career counseling. It refers to career development approaches that emphasize understanding our subjective experiences and how we construct meaning as we experience life. And these approaches include the narrative approach by Cochrane and the constructivist career counseling approach. So Cochrane's narrative approach is postmodern. It views clients as both the narrator and the protagonist of their life stories. Career counselors can help clients construct their future career paths in this approach by examining the life stories, exploring subjective meanings and purposes that have been dominant thus far, and authoring the next chapters of their lives. And so as a counselor, you can help them with writing their story. Well, how do you want your career story to go? How do you want it to start? How do you want it to continue to go? How do you want the story to change? How do you want the story to end, right? Clients might have career problems because their stories are unrealistic or unattainable. Their stories might feature themes of failure, disappointment, or defeat. Their stories might lack a theme of self-efficacy, or what Cochrane calls a sense of agency, or a person's sense capacity to bring about desirable outcomes or carry out a task, right? In terms of the approach, you're going to elaborate on the problem that they're having in their career, help them compose a life history timeline, perhaps, found a future narrative that they want to see, that they seek to create, and help them develop visions for the future and how they can portray that, develop that future narrative that they'd like to have, and then help them with constructing a reality that aligns with those future goals. You can change the life structure, you can enact a role, you can help role play a role, and then crystallize whatever is needed in order to develop the career outcome they're looking for. In terms of elaborating a career problem, A career problem is defined as the gap between what's desired and what's anticipated. So between what you want and what you're hoping to get, and you're not having it yet, right? So career counselors should listen to the client's description of their problem from a narrative perspective. So where's the gap? What are the themes in their story? Is there constant stories of giving up or letting go or changing expectations or being indecisive, right? What is the story theme show you, or themes? What do the themes show you? You also can use traditional standardized tests and constructivist approach to using vocational card sorts, which was in one of the previous lectures. So composing life history. So you want to focus on subjective life history from the past to the present. Listen for subjective meanings and stories behind each chronological event. Listen for the unifying plot present in the life history. Counselor and client work as co-authors to rewrite life histories to reflect themes of self-efficacy, ability, hope, and promise. Informal assessment techniques can include lifelines, life chapters, success experiences, family constellations, role models, and early recollections. And these are things that you guys will learn how to use over time. But looking at family constellations, basically looking at how the family set up and what are the interactions, kind of like a genogram, which is something you may have already learned about or that you will learn about. Okay, so founding a future narrative. It focuses on developing a narrative from present into the future. You want to help as a co-author to identify the client's desires, strengths, interests, values, to be able to really paint the picture of what is this future that we're trying to create. And sometimes through envisioning the future reality, it can help clients become more motivated to chase after it and get more involved in creating it. It's called positive imagery. The future is one way to look at that. So eliciting client visions for the future, you can also use the lifeline technique, extension of life, and then the guided fantasy, which is kind of like what I was just describing, a positive imagery, where it's like, close your eyes. I want you to imagine a happy life and you have all the things you want in your career and da, 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 da. What do you see? What are you doing? Who's there? What's going on in that image that you create, that fantasy that you create? Okay, also for portraying a future narrative, the counselor and client can work as co-authors to develop a script for your future, for the client's future. And that can involve a mission statement, listing client strengths, describing the client's work needs, right? Do they need a 401k? Do they need health insurance? Do they need a close commute, right? What do they need from their job? Acknowledge any vulnerabilities. And then lastly, you list all the possible solutions to what the problems are that are presenting. So basically brainstorming, right? In terms of constructing the reality, you want to take action to get a reality check and confirm desired direction. In that reality check, you're going to evaluate the viability of the career path that's being considered, help with gaining experience, integrate the realities, look at possible activities that they can do, like job shadowing, informational interviewing, volunteering, such things like that. And then when you're changing the life structure, once that future narrative is written down and it's desirable, it's realistic, it's something that they're wanting to do and that they can do, they're capable of doing, you want to look at how they might need to be changing their external life structures, right? So they need to change their daily routine. Do they need to make childcare arrangements? Do they need to figure out commuting or riding the bus or carpooling? Do they need to change the way that chores are divvied up at home or responsibilities with family, right? And then they may also have to look at changing internal life structures, which can involve their own behaviors, developing skills, changing self-defeating activities or habits, or even self-defeating beliefs, right? We talked about negative self-esteem previously, negative self-efficacy. So enacting a role, this is where you're making intentional choices about how to spend your time. So you're going to engage in activities that are consistent with the desired future narrative. So if you're wanting to get away from selling drugs, stop spending time with people that sell drugs, right? Like that would be an example of a way that you would engage in activity that aligns with that narrative of I don't want to sell drugs anymore. Crystallization occurs when the action phase of implementing the future narrative successfully resolves the client's career problem by closing the gap between what was and what ought to be. Savick is career construction theory. It's got implications here as well. So in the career construction theory, the self and self-development are important. So the self isn't something to be discovered. It is something that's actively constructed and revised over time through the stories we create about our experiences. So there's an identity narrative. The self is developing. It's not a concrete thing. It's flexible. It's malleable. It changes over time as we experience things. There are three views of the self through career construction theory. So there's the self as the actor, where young children act in ways not guided by metacognition. Their behavior results in messages, descriptions that the child internalizes as true, and there can be interjection of guides and incorporation of models. There's also the other two views that the self is an agent and the self is an author. So as an agent, older children use metacognition to act in purposeful, goal-directed ways, and results in a sense of self-agency, and experiences result in revising the identity narrative. And three challenges that might prompt self-agentic behavior. There can be vocational development tasks, occupational transitions, or work traumas that happen where you become more of an agent, right? And then there's the author, where in late adolescence, you're integrating action and agency into a life story and unique identity. And this culminates in authorship of an identity narrative, which is the subjective story we create about ourselves. So what story do you tell yourself about yourself? I'm a good person, bad person, I'm capable, I'm incapable, right? What are these? I have a history of failing at everything I've ever done, right? Or I have a history of overcoming all the hard things I've ever faced, right? What's the narrative that you're telling yourself? And then the occupational plot is the objective facts of one's occupational history and vocational behavior. Excuse me. So implications. So for vocational guidance, the objective trait factor approach still can be used with young people needing help identifying skills of interest, values, the personality, the occupational matches for the interest, values, skills, and personality. That's what that can be used for. And, that's also something that I haven't touched on yet, but I have a family member that always told me, you may not always be able to work a job that fulfills your interest, values, your skills, and your personality type. And that's okay. You got to have a job in order to pay your bills and put food in your mouth and a roof over your head. You can always act on your values, interests, skills, personality through hobbies, through things you do on the weekend, through missions work, through volunteering, these different things. So sometimes we have to help clients find a work that can find a job that can just help pay bills for a time. And then we'll work on the passions later because they've got basic needs that need to be met first. So I just wanted to throw that out there as something to consider with clients, because they may not always get to do exactly what they want to in the time frame that they're looking for. They might have to wait for that to happen, but they still have bills to pay in the meantime, right? And that's okay to normalize that. For career education, subjective developmental and learning theory approach can be useful with clients seeking to further develop within a single organization or single career path. Yeah. Counseling for career construction, also known as career counseling, is social constructivist with a project perspective. So you're a project that's being built, never ending. It's useful for people who want to actively author their career stories and construct their career futures, especially those who are affected by instability of globalized workplace. Right? So looking at application of these different things. And then there is a life design paradigm involving 4 steps and techniques. So there's construction, deconstruction, reconstruction, and co-construction that you can go through with a client. And you see how there's the interview and there's questioning, the assessment, and then making a statement, taking action there. So again, this is kind of it is a framework that you can use when doing career counseling. Okay, where do I start? Okay, I'm going to start with construction and doing the interview, and then I'm going to do deconstruction, right? And then the interview is developed by Savicus to understand how clients construct their career. There's an identity narrative versus occupational plot that you're looking at. We're not going to do a volunteer because this is a recorded video, so I can't. But An introductory question could be, how can I be useful to you as you construct your career? How can I help you build the career that you're looking for? Right? Things like that. When you're looking at early role models, you can ask, whom did you admire when you were 6? Describe the person to me. Tell me about the person as you viewed him or her back then. What was he or she like? What was that person like? How do you think you're similar to this person, and how are you different? What do these 3 people have in common? Someone that you admired. So how are you similar and how are you different? How are those 3 people alike? What do they have in common, if you wanted to ask? And then looking at favorite magazines, this is another way to gain insight to who someone is. And what are your favorite magazines? Or what are your favorite shows? Or what are your favorite websites? Describe it, each one to me. What do you like about each one of those things? What sections do you read first? Right, you're gaining insight into what their interests are and what draws their attention. What's your favorite story? Tell me the story. Why is that your favorite story? What makes that your favorite? And for a motto, what's your favorite saying? What's your favorite quote or favorite Bible verse or song lyric? What's something that sticks out to you that's meaningful for you and why? Right? It can give you insight into what their morals, what their values are. And that can also help you with discovering career values, what kind of narrative maybe they'd want to create. You can also look at early recollections and headlines. So tell me about 3 of your earliest memories. For each, tell me where it just occurred and what happened and how it turned out. For each, tell me how you felt. Describe how you felt when those things happened. And maybe you can say, give me a headline for each memory as if it was going to appear in tomorrow's newspaper. So including a verb, right? So making them really think about early recollections, early memories, and maybe their first 3 memories that they have are all really negative. That's setting a standard. That's maybe setting a tone for a negative outlook on life from that point forward, potentially depending on follow-up memories. But if the first things you remember about your life were bad, that can have an impact on the way that they view life. And then the career story assessment, you can identify goals, the preoccupations, solutions, settings of interest, the script, their best advice for themselves, think about educational things, occupational options that might be most appealing, and then help them to construct a life portrait. What do you want your life to look like? Okay, and if that's what you want it to look like, what's the first step in the direction towards creating that portrait, creating that outcome for you, right? And then the life portrait's an oral story using as many words and phrases and themes from the career story interview as possible. The life portraits created to challenge old meanings, reframe sense of self in the best light possible, and to see possibilities for being true to oneself and navigating through the circumstances that prompted the client to seek assistance. All right. That could even be an art activity where they draw it. Some people enjoy drawing as part of their therapeutic process. So lastly, what you can do is you can apply this to the cast of clients. How would using these different concepts look, using them for Wayne or Lakeisha or Jillian or Juan or Doris? And thank you for listening to this lecture. See you in the next one.